Across the globe, governments, developers, and power players have tried to build the future at mega scale, creating cities with no roads, airports with no planes, and towers with no purpose. The pitch is always the same, centering around innovation, efficiency, and progress. However, many of these projects are so wildly over-engineered, mismanaged, or untethered from reality that they become iconic failures. And so in this video, we're going to do a global tour around the world of the most infamous mega projects ever attempted. The ones that ran out of money, people, physics, and just common sense. And we'll start all the way over in Malaysia. You see, Joanne Kaur lives on the 28th floor of a gleaming high-rise in what was supposed to be Southeast Asia's most ambitious urban development. She and her husband are the only residents on the entire floor, maybe even the entire building. This place is eerie, she explains. Even during the day when you step out of your front door, the corridor is dark. Welcome to Forest City, Malaysia's $100 billion development that promised utopia but delivered a ghost town. Located in Johor near Singapore, Forest City was meant to house 700,000 residents living in luxury waterfront condominiums. The marketing materials promised a dream paradise for all of mankind. A futuristic eco-city featuring golf courses, water parks, offices, bars, and restaurants. Drive through Forest City today, however, and you'll experience something very, very different. There are rows of empty skyscrapers standing silent and empty, and at night, it really hits you, as you'll see just a handful of illuminated rooms scattered across entire towers built for thousands. So how did this megacity end up like this? Well, when China's largest property developer Country Garden unveiled it in 2016, the Chinese property boom was in full flow. Developers were borrowing colossal sums to build both at home and abroad for China's emerging middle class, and Forest City would be their crown jewel. A place where Chinese buyers could own luxury international property while escaping China's pollution. The target market was never Malaysians. With apartments priced around $1.14 million, they were far beyond what most locals could afford. Instead, Country Garden hoped wealthy Chinese investors would buy units as vacation homes or rental properties. But then, everything collapsed. Chinese President Xi Jinping imposed strict capital controls, including a $50,000 annual cap on how much money citizens could spend outside of the country. Malaysia's government also changed hands, and the new Prime Minister restricted visas for Chinese buyers. And so what was the result of all of this? Thousands of luxury apartments left standing vacant in the middle of nowhere. According to recent estimates, just over 1% of the entire development is occupied. But funnily enough, tourism to the Forest City is now actually increasing, as people solely go there just to experience its unique, lonely atmosphere. There are hundreds of Google reviews documenting these visits. One person writes, "This is literally a ghost town. The streets are so empty and I'm the only one on the road." And yet it's for these reasons that some actually dig the vibe. With one review reading, "Simply love this ghost city for its quietness," but most people just find it really weird. A monstrosity of a concrete jungle, with the Forest City standing as a monument to what happens when developers build for investors rather than residents. The lesson is painfully clear. You can build the fanciest city in the world, but without people to live in it, you've just created the world's most expensive ghost town. But let's now take a look into Egypt, where 30 miles east of Cairo, something wild is happening in the Egyptian desert. You see, the Egyptian government is literally building an entire city from scratch. And this is Egypt's new administrative capital, a massive $58 billion project that is supposed to fix all of Cairo's problems. And Cairo has a lot of problems. The place is bursting with 22 million people. The traffic is notoriously insane, pollution is through the roof, crime is everywhere, and terrorism is becoming more rife. So what's the government's solution to all of these massive problems? Well, to just build a new city. And we're not talking about a small development here. This thing is huge, about the same size as Singapore. It's planned to contain Africa's tallest building, the Middle East's biggest cathedral, and enough government buildings to run the entire country. About 48,000 government employees work there already. But here's where it gets interesting. This whole project is 51% owned by the military. Now, some people think that moving the government away from the stage of Egypt's 2011 revolution is no accident, as moving all these government buildings makes it a lot harder for protesters to reach government buildings when they're 30 miles into the desert. Then there's the money. Now, Egypt's not exactly flush with cash right now. I mean, they already needed a $3 billion IMF bailout recently. and yet somehow they're finding money for this massive desert showcase. But the question is, who's even going to live there? The cheapest apartments start at around $50,000 in a country where most people make about $3,000 a year. The whole place is also designed with surveillance in mind. Over 6,000 cameras monitor the streets, and they're using AI to track everything from water usage to waste management. And you can imagine, probably people too. It's one step away from having a social credit system, as residents can already submit complaints through a mobile app. But is this just a huge facade, covering up all the problems eating away at Egypt right now? Well, only time will tell if this ambitious gamble actually pays off, or if it's just destined to join Forest City as a ghost city. But before we continue, a lot of people tend to reach out to me to learn how to express or communicate their ideas in the form of full-length videos like I do. The kind you've always wanted to create, the kind you'd be excited to share within your peer group, irrespective of whatever skill level you're at. And NVIDIA AI enables you to do just that. You simply start by typing in a prompt or going through one of the workflows based on the video you'd like to create. Just make sure you select use only AI clips to ensure your video has all generative AI footage. This will directly give you the first cut of your video in just a few minutes.
Under the moonlit desert sky, Indiana Jones faces a tall barbed wire fence.
From there, you can fine-tune your video and edit it by using simple text-based commands via the edit command box. Just type in whatever you'd like to change, like translate to French, add my voice, make the video more intense. And all of this is just so insane because you would never have to see or interact with a video timeline again. And you can actually edit your videos using just text commands. Not only that, but you can go one step further and clone your voice so that all the videos you create can be narrated in your own voice. Unlike traditional video tools with steep learning curves that only solve parts of your video creation process, NVIDIA is the creative partner that you have always wanted. It removes the friction and puts you in the director's seat, so you can focus on your vision while NVIDIA AI does all the heavy lifting. And you can actually try NVIDIA AI for free. This will save you hundreds of dollars that you would otherwise spend on editing, animating, and other production costs. But nothing quite compares to North Korea's Ryong Hotel, a 1,080-foot concrete pyramid that's been looming over the country's capital of Pyongyang since 1992 without hosting a single guest. So how is this even possible? Well, the story began in 1987. During this time, South Korea was riding high and preparing to host the Olympics and showing off its economic miracle to the world. Just before the fall of the Soviet Union, communism was still strong in the world, and North Korea didn't seem quite as insane as it does today. And so North Korea wanted to show to the world, in a way to culturally alter the Cold War, that communism could really overcome capitalism. And to do so, they had to make the Olympics absolutely incredible. And part of doing this would mean building the tallest hotel on Earth. And this was designed to be an absolute monster. 105 stories, 3,000 rooms, 5 revolving restaurants at the top with panoramic views. A building so massive it would dwarf everything else in Pyongyang by hundreds of feet. However, once construction began, the reality soon set in. After rushing to complete the concrete shell by 1992, the money had just completely run dry. For the next 16 years, the Hotel of Doom stood as a naked concrete frame in the middle of the capital. Impossible to hide this monstrosity, and yet it was impossible to finish. And what was the government's solution to all of this? Well, some just claim they erased it from official photographs and maps of the city. But then in 2008, something strange happened. Construction suddenly out of nowhere resumed when an Egyptian company covered the concrete with glass and metal panels. And by 2011, the hotel actually did look finished, at least from the outside. Inside, however, was a completely different story altogether. Simon Cockerell, one of the few foreigners ever allowed into the hotel in 2012, describes what he found, saying, "First of all, we had a presentation from the director of the site, with videos made quite a long time ago. They then took us into the lobby area, where there was a lot of exposed cement. And then in 2018, the regime just gave up trying to finish the interior and instead slapped massive LED screens on the building's side. Now every night, the hotel projects propaganda videos and a giant rotating North Korean flag. And after nearly 40 years, the Hotel of Doom remains what it's always been, a monument to failed ambition and a failed country that's too expensive to finish and too embarrassing to tear down. Despite occasional rumors of opening, no guest has ever actually checked in, and the world's tallest unoccupied building continues its lonely vigil over Pyongyang. Now let's come out of Asia to focus in on Saudi Arabia. but we'll find a mirrored mirage in the desert. All the way here in the barren Saudi desert, a science fiction nightmare is being forced into reality as we speak. The line, also called Neom, is a 100-mile long, 500-meter high mirrored skyscraper slicing through the sand like a knife. Inside this reflective wall, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman imagines 9 million people living in a paradise without cars or roads, with flying taxis, whisking residents between neighborhoods as holographic teachers educate their children beneath an artificial moon. The Crown Prince calls it a revolution in civilization, comparing this to building the pyramids. And this comparison is probably more accurate than he intended, as like the pyramids, this weird techno-city is being built through force and blood. Colonel Rabi Alenzi, a former Saudi intelligence officer now in exile, told journalists how he was ordered to clear any villages in the way of the line. He said his orders were explicit: whoever resists should be killed on the spot. This wasn't an idle threat. When a tribesman named Abdul Rahim refused to abandon his ancestral home, Saudi security forces shot him dead the next day. Entire villages, homes, hospitals, schools have been erased from existence to make way for the Crown Prince's fever dream. But the line faces a more fundamental problem than human resistance, and that is the laws of physics. In the desert, where temperatures regularly swing 40 degrees between day and night, a structure this long would expand and contract by several meters daily. Engineers state that the materials to handle this simply don't exist. But this hasn't stopped the Crown Prince from demanding increasingly fantastical features, like a 30-story glass building designed to hang upside down from the bridge, aptly named the Chandelier, a concept so absurd that they actually hired a Marvel Studios designer to visualize it. The dystopian nature of this project is off the scale. The line would be a surveillance state unlike anything the world has ever seen, with plans to include AI systems that monitor residents' health, movements, and even emotional states through sensors. Not to be outdone by nature, plans include creating artificial weather systems inside the structure and gene-edited crops that can grow in darkness. And behind the glossy 3D concept models, the project is already unraveling. When contractors submitted realistic construction bids, executives manipulated financial projections to hide the true costs. Plenty of Western companies are joining in. McKinsey & Co alone reportedly received over $130 million in a single year in consulting fees. But after spending over $50 billion, only 2% of the line has actually been constructed. But the Crown Prince's obsession remains undiminished. And while the world sees the absurdity of this, people are still dying and being displaced for what increasingly looks like the world's most bizarre vanity project ever. It's not so much a city of tomorrow, but a monument to one man's megalomania, built on sand both literally and metaphorically. And something similar actually happened all the way over in Dubai that was quite possibly even more of a failure than the other ones on our list. When you fly into Dubai, you instantly realize that this isn't a normal city. The world's tallest building towers above the surrounding desert, and on the coast, you might spot the strikingly man-made Palm Jumeirah, studded with glamorous restaurants and accommodation. But there's at least one project here that hasn't been so successful, and that is the World's Island. This is The World, the ultimate trophy purchased for the global elite who could casually tell friends, I now own Australia. Or let's spend the weekend at my private Italy. When the Dubai developer announced this $14 million project in 2003, the vision was intoxicating. The super rich would zip between islands on private yachts, enjoying exclusive luxury homes and boutique resorts far from the commoners on the mainland. Everyone from Richard Branson to Karl Lagerfeld reportedly expressed interest. But what was the reality of this? Well, the world is sinking back into the sand from which it once came from. You see, to create this artificial wonderland, Dubai dredged millions of tons of sand from the Persian Gulf seabed, sculpting this into recognizable landmasses held in place by massive rock barriers. The collection consists of about 300 islands, with the entire archipelago spanning 5.4 miles across. By 2008, the basic geography was complete, and the developer claimed 70% of the islands were sold. But then, just in that moment, the global financial crisis hit, and Dubai's property market collapsed like a sandcastle at high tide. And what followed was a tragic comedy of excess. The man who purchased Ireland for £25 million ended up taking his own life. Great Britain's owner was imprisoned for bouncing checks, and the developer itself needed a $25 billion government bailout. Construction halted everywhere except Greenland, which was conveniently owned by Dubai's ruler. You see, it wasn't just the cash though, as nature had other plans for the world islands. Richard Wilmot Smith of Penguin Marine, the company contracted to ferry people to the islands, explained how the islands are gradually falling back into the sea. The developer naturally denied this was happening. It's not dead, insisted company spokesman Graham Lovett, pleading that it's just in a coma, which isn't much more inspiring than dead to be fair. Today, One Island, Lebanon has been developed into a beach club where wealthy tourists can gawk at the abandoned project and probably wish they'd gone somewhere else, while a luxury resort opened in South America. Developers are trying to resurrect the project with a European-themed resort called Heart of Europe, which is now under development and features ambitious plans for fake snow in the desert and underwater homes. But for now at least, the World Islands are Dubai's most tragic infrastructure failure. I mean, who'd have thought that building sandcastles in the middle of the sea was a bad idea? Now let's head over through California's Central Valley, where you'll see something strange that might catch your eye. Massive concrete structures rising dramatically from the ground, and then abruptly ending mid-air. These half-finished structures are the only physical evidence we have of California's high-speed rail, where $13 billion has suddenly vanished. And the only thing moving at high speed is the taxpayers' money flying out the door. And yet it all started so promisingly. In 2008, California voters approved what seemed like a reasonable plan. A $33 billion bullet train connecting San Francisco to Los Angeles in just 2 hours and 40 minutes, with sleek trains hitting 220 miles per hour, and the entire system would be completed by 2020. This was the first sign that America was really going to step up and move past its car culture to compete with places like China, Europe, and Japan, connecting two of the most powerful cities in the country with a cutting-edge public transport system. And yet flash forward to today and not a single mile of track has even been laid. Not even a single train purchased, and the cost has exploded to a mind-numbing $113 billion. And the completion date? Well, engineering projections suggest that the train can't be completed even in this century. So how did America's great leap into high-speed rail go so spectacularly wrong in the most high-tech state in the world? Well, it started with politics overriding common sense. The most direct route between LA and San Francisco would have followed Interstate 5 through the Tejon Pass, what locals call the Grapevine. Instead, powerful Los Angeles County Supervisor Mike Antonovich pushed for a bizarre dogleg through Palmdale in his district, adding 41 miles and billions in costs. It was described simply as wasteful. Then came the strangest decision of all. Instead of starting construction in either San Francisco or Los Angeles, where millions of potential riders live, they began in the isolated, sparsely populated Central Valley. Why? Because Obama-era federal grants worth $3.5 billion came with a catch. The money had to be spent in the Central Valley by 2017 or California would lose it. The state was so desperate for those federal dollars that they agreed to build the middle of the railroad first, with no connections to major population centers. And here's where things went from bad to worse. To meet federal deadlines, the rail authority signed construction contracts before securing a single parcel of land, or even completing basic design work. And so by January 2013, the state hadn't acquired any of the land needed for construction. And when they finally broke ground in 2015, the chaos was just beginning. The authority awarded a $985 million contract to construction giant Tutor Perini. Despite the company receiving the lowest technical score for safety, design, and engineering, another mysterious holdup in this project's comedy of errors. So by 2023, that $985 million contract had ballooned to $2.4 billion. While brown envelopes were probably exchanged behind closed doors, thousands of Central Valley residents had their land seized. Farmers watched helplessly as their operations were split up, with the promised compensation often delayed for years. The situation has become so dire that Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley formally requested that the FBI investigate the project. In a letter to the FBI Director Kash Patel, Kiley asked how it was possible to spend over $13 billion without a single station opening. And the bigger question being, who benefited from all of this money disappearing? Foreign rail experts have watched on in disbelief. French rail operator SNCF, which has built successful high-speed systems worldwide, eventually abandoned interest in the project. One official said they were to, quote, be leaving for North Africa, which was less politically dysfunctional. Morocco's bullet train started service in 2018, with work beginning just 6 years before in 2012. Meanwhile, America's embarrassing answer to the bullet trains of Asia and Europe sits idle under the Central Valley sun. Now let's check out two of the world's most ridiculous airport projects. What makes them special? Both cost billions to build, yet neither one ever managed to attract an actual passenger. First up, let's go to Europe, where we'll find the Berlin-Brandenburg Airport, where 7 billion euros was spent over nearly 3 decades to create an airport that remained empty for 9 years. The airport story begins optimistically enough in 1989, when the Berlin Wall came down. City planners dreamed up a gleaming international gateway worthy of new German capital. But what followed was a masterclass in how to not build, well, anything. By 2012, when the airport was scheduled to finally open, inspectors discovered over 550,000 defects. Yes, you read that right, 500,000 problems, including a fire safety system that flat out just didn't work, and 170,000 kilometers of incorrectly installed cables. That's enough faulty wiring to circle the Earth 4 times. The airport's design was fatally flawed from the outset, with its chief architect hating shopping so much that he designed an airport with almost no retail space. When officials realized that this would eventually cost them half of their expected revenue, they frantically ordered new floors added solely for stores. But the financial damage was already catastrophic. Some politicians suggested scrapping the whole thing and starting over, but by then they'd gone way too far to turn back. And in a final twist of cosmic irony, the airport finally opened on Halloween 2020, during a global pandemic when almost nobody was flying. The pandemic actually became Brandenburg's salvation, giving the embarrassed airport operators time to fix remaining issues without the scrutiny of millions of travelers. This was very much the case of Murphy's Law in action, as everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and definitely not the best example of German engineering. But Spain also has its own contender for the world's most pointless airport, Murcia del Rio International Airport, quite possibly the loneliest, most useless airport ever built. Constructed at the cost of 1 billion euros during Spain's debt-fueled boom years, this massive facility sits about 200 kilometers south of Madrid, far beyond any reasonable driving distance from the city it was supposedly meant to serve. Opened with a grand fanfare in 2009, the airport boasted a stunning 4,100-meter runway, which is one of Europe's longest. Its passenger terminal could process 2 million travelers annually, with expansion capacity for up to 10 million. But there was just one tiny problem. Almost nobody came. Only 2 airlines ever bothered to fly there, with the latter's service requiring government subsidies just to operate at all. And after 3 years of echoing terminals and empty gates, the final flight departed in April 2012. What followed ramped up the absurdity levels even higher. After filing for bankruptcy with over 300 million euros in debt, the airport went up for auction in 2013, with a minimum price of 100 million euros. When no buyers emerged, the price dropped reportedly until July 2015, when a Chinese-led consortium offered the princely sum of 10,000 euros. That's right, 10,000 euros for an entire international airport. The court actually rejected the bid as insultingly low, but it perfectly illustrated how worthless this project had become. The airport sat abandoned for years, its only visitors being film crews taking advantage of the post-apocalyptic emptiness. Jean-Claude Van Damme even performed his famous epic split commercial between 2 reversing trucks on the desert highway. Eventually sold for 56 million euros in 2016, the airport finally reopened in 2019, but not for regular passenger flights. Instead, it found its niche as an aircraft storage facility and occasional cargo hub. A modest ending for such an ambitious project. But if you thought that was bad, we really need to once again turn our attention to the US. Because have you ever spent $19 billion on something you never used? Well, the US government certainly has. You see, when you're driving through the Nevada desert, you'll be about 100 miles from the Vegas Strip. At this point, there's nothing but scrubland for miles, and then suddenly a massive tunnel entrance appears, carved right into a mountain. Welcome to Yucca Mountain, quite possibly the most expensive empty tunnel in human history. And it all comes down to a problem that's been haunting America for decades. What do we do with all of our nuclear waste? See, nuclear plants across the country have been piling up radioactive waste for years. This stuff stays deadly for thousands of years and nobody wants it in their backyard. So what's the government's brilliant solution? Find someone else's backyard, preferably in a state without much political power. Enter Nevada circa 1987. The selection process wasn't exactly a model of integrity. Congress was supposed to be evaluating 3 potential sites in Washington, Texas, and Nevada. But wouldn't you know it, the Speaker of the House was from Texas, and the House Majority Leader was from Washington. So suddenly those sites were dropped and only Nevada remained. A coincidence, I'm sure. With $19 billion at stake, people started queuing up to take on the work. contractors charged millions for tests that were never properly conducted. Some reported being ordered to disable water meters so that the Department of Energy could exceed its water allocations without ever getting caught. They found equipment calibration records had been faked, sometimes for equipment they didn't even possess. Also, the area they chose was really bad. The mountain wasn't as dry and stable as it was claimed, and an earthquake fault was running right under the site, which is obviously not ideal for a nuclear waste facility. So rather than rethinking the entire project, they just moved some structures a few hundred feet and kept going. And after $19 billion in costs and nearly 30 years of planning and construction, the Obama administration finally pulled the plug in 2010. The whole fiasco would be more amusing if it weren't so expensive and corrupt. Back in 1982, Congress established the Nuclear Waste Fund, requiring utilities operating nuclear plants to pay fees for the eventual disposal of their spent fuel. These fees were, of course, passed on to the consumers through their electric bills. But even after the Yucca Mountain project was abandoned, they kept collecting the fees until courts finally forced them to stop in 2014. That nuclear waste fund now holds over $52 billion sitting idle, while nuclear waste powers up power plants across America. The $19 billion hole that nobody wanted, but plenty of people got rich building. But now it's time to end the video back in the Middle East, with one of the most outrageous megaprojects ever conceived of. Because you see, the line isn't the only absurd megaproject rising from the Saudi desert. Just a few hundred miles away stands the Jeddah Tower, a gigantic concrete skeleton frozen since 2018. Construction began in 2013 under the direction of a billionaire prince Al-Walid bin Talal. When completed, if it's ever completed, this $26 billion structure will pierce the sky at an eye-watering 1,008 meters, becoming the world's first kilometer-high building and dwarfing Dubai's Burj Khalifa by nearly 180 meters. The engineering challenges of building at this height are really crazy. For starters, wind forces at 1,000 meters are powerful enough to make the entire structure sway by several meters. So to combat this, architects designed a three-sided tapering form that reduces wind resistance. The reinforced concrete core and steel frame system uses specially developed high-strength concrete that can withstand enormous pressure at the base. The tower will feature 59 elevators, including double-deck systems moving at 12 meters per second. A massive circular sky terrace extends 30 meters from one side at the 157th floor, offering views all the way across the Red Sea. By 2018, workers had completed 63 of the planned 167 floors, reaching about 252 meters in total. But then the whole project just completely stopped when Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman detained hundreds of Saudi elites, including the prince and Bakr bin Laden, Osama's half-brother, whose construction firm was building the tower, in what he called an anti-corruption campaign. After their release, the Jeddah Tower remained frozen for 5 years, while the Crown Prince turned his attention to the line. But then in 2024 to 2025, construction finally restarted, with a new completion date of 2028. But we just don't know when this incredible project will even be completed, or if it's just destined to suffer a similar fate to other projects here. Suspended in time like the North Korean hotel, the Dubai's fake World Islands, or it'll just be completely abandoned mid-construction like California's high-speed rail. But you most likely wouldn't bet on it being finished by the 2028 deadline. But as we zoom out here, looking at all these mega projects, what links them together isn't just ambition, but hubris. Across the globe, we see the same pattern. Grand visions, billions spent, reality ignored, and dreams eventually abandoned. And yet we keep building these things anyway. Each generation convinced they'll succeed where others failed. After all, the pharaohs built pyramids, medieval kings built cathedrals, and today's rulers build super tall skyscrapers and overly ambitious urban developments. The tools change, but the impulse doesn't. Everybody wants to leave their mark, to touch the sky, and show that humanity can do the impossible. And while frustrating, corrupt, and hugely wasteful, these failed mega projects can also be fascinating. Someone else will always come along, look at the ruins, and think my tower will be different, my city will work, my project will change everything. Or maybe they'll just end up in a video about the world's dumbest mega projects.